Thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Medin. The name of this panel is Dissident Voices, The Power of Artistic Imagination. And I'm delighted to be here with two guests who've come all the way to Nourished. On the one hand, from Ukraine, Yuri Andrukhovych, who will be talking to us about his most recent novel, Radio Night, which has also been translated into French, and with the very French title, Radio Nuit. And also Bothayna Al-Essa, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. Bothayna Al-Essa, with her novel The Guardian of Surfaces, as it's known in the UK. It has a different title in the United States. A novel that has appeared recently and was a finalist for the National Book Award in translation in the United States last year, which is a very competitive prize for the best work translated into English in the United States. So I'm very grateful to have you both with us here tonight. I suppose I wanted to begin because there are so many parallel concerns in these two novels that are set in different places and written in different ways. And I thought I would begin with you, Yuri, and ask a question about Radio Night, because this book, which feels, it's a novel, it's a work of fiction, and there are many recognizable aspects of, that evoke Europe, that evoke, in particular, Ukraine, but you don't name the locations, and so it seems to be ambiguous and uncertain. And I wanted to ask a question about it, because apropos of the topic, revolution and revolt, you actually have barricades, in this novel, and which make one think of Maidan and the protest movement almost a decade ago in Ukraine. And I wonder about, well, first I have a simple question, which is, can you say something about where you were at that time during the Maidan protests? And then I have a second question, which has to do with what happens to those kinds of experience when you work on them in a fiction. But first, can you say something about the experience of where you were and how you were processing it at that time?
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm very sorry for not speaking French. I would speak French, I wish to speak French, but sorry, I cannot. I start by some episode which occurred 2 weeks ago as I was a guest in Buenos Aires. They had their International Book Fair, which is one of the biggest in Latin American countries. And I was invited to some interview made by a journalist from Uruguay. And she was clearly a Marxist kind of journalist. So her question to me was, so what actually did capitalism bring to your country, to Ukraine? And my answer was, it brought us 2 revolutions. And I was a witness of both of them. I was a participant of both of them, and they were the real bourgeois revolutions. 2 Maidans in 2004, it was a huge social protest against the falsification of our elections, presidential elections, and the protesters. So I may say we won this protest. And our candidate, the candidate of opposition, won the additional part of elections. And so we had our first president who came not from former ruling class, but who came from opposition. And since then, it is quite a normal thing for our country, for Ukraine. We always, each election is the victory of opposition in our country. And the second Maidan is more dramatic, is even a tragic event. It was almost 10 years later after the first one, and it was social protest of Ukrainian citizens against the scandalous decision of then Ukrainian government to stop the European integration of the country. So I can say European dream has created Ukrainian civil society. The European dream is something which created middle class in Ukraine, and middle class was the power which won on two revolutions, on two Maidans. And this second episode, the winter of 2013-14, it was much longer. It was 3 months, which means not just 90 days, but also 90 nights. And the
in the middle of the winter.
It was winter. It was really cold, and the nights were absolutely scary, full of anxiety, full of fear, because the worst things occurred always in the night. So the special police troops attacked the barricades always in the night, usually so between 4 and 6 o'clock, as everyone deadly wants to sleep, just to relax. So they used this possibility, and they were attacking our barricades. And my favorite hero of this situation was quite enigmatic person, musician. He appears in a completely black dressing.
So this is not fiction?
It's not a fiction.
I say this because there's there an echo when in the microphone, by the way. I wonder what to do with it. Because in the novel, there is a character who plays piano.
It's the main character of the novel, but this character has a direct prototype, and his nickname was Piano Extremist. So if you Google, even today, if you look in internet for, let's say, Piano Extremist Maidan Kiev 2014, you find videos with how does he play in this winter time with temperatures like -10 or 15. He used to play piano everywhere because it was one of the tricks of the revolution to bring as much culture as you can, to do the protest, first of all, absolutely peaceful, without any kind of violence, and second, full of artistic events, full of poetry, full of music. It didn't succeed because the state power was too aggressive. They used all the time violence which was always escalating. So I was his listener, one of many people who surrounded always his instruments, because there were a few of pianos everywhere on that territory. And I decided at this moment if I have to write, if I will survive here, first of all, if I will live, and if I will be still writing the novels, the books, then this piano extremist should be one of my heroes in my next book. And I usually don't do some notes, I don't have some diaries, but I tried just to keep in my memory, in my head, everything I felt there. So maybe too long, but I tried to make some introduction to...
Oh, you also already answered the second question too, because I think as you read the novel, there are these very powerful evocations of the pianist performing in this environment, of the cold, of the violence, of these different secret agents of the police trying to interfere and arrest, and the menace and fear that the protesters themselves feel. It's quite powerful, along with their kind of belief. There's something magical about, as this pianist is playing, that the participants on the barricades feel like they'll be safe. As long as he's playing, there's a kind of, it creates a kind of shield, a form of confidence, that a warmth that that everybody there feels, and it's very vitally communicated through the fiction. I want to talk about another real revolution, and it wasn't in Kuwait with you, but rather this larger sequence of revolutions across the Arab world in the Arab Spring, right? Because often when you have revolution, there's also the other half of it, which is counter-revolution. And I'm curious, because your book is about censorship,
yes.
About the difference, the before and the after in your experience. You may speak about Kuwait, but maybe even more widely your experience as a bookseller, as a writer. How have things changed between these movements that had the ambition to liberalize, right, or to kind of create greater freedoms or less oppression? Are things... Well, no, just leave it that way. Like, there's the before and after.
Yes.
Yeah.
So mainly the Arab Spring revolutions, they weren't really about freedom, but more about corruption and poverty and hunger, those issues mainly. So the mass population that were participating in those revolutions didn't care much about the freedom of expression, art, culture. They had other priorities, which are absolutely valid. Mm-hmm. I guess it's now safe to say that all these movements failed, and many of them backfired. We can see it in many countries. I don't want to be specific because I don't want to go to trouble, get myself into trouble. Mm-hmm. But in terms of censorship in Kuwait, one of the added a new set of books were added to the banning. Is the books that talk about those regimes or those revolutions, or be critical about other countries, or even glorify any civil movement.
Okay, so there's an expansion of the number of topics that should not be addressed.
Exactly that,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to read a quotation from the novel. My grandfather once wrote that the idea of losing the book stored in the cloud worried him more than a possible fire in his bookstore, she told him. Her gaze anxiously skimmed the books on her shelves like a protective mother. And he was right. After the revolution, hundreds and thousands of books that were published on the internet were lost forever, even though some people insist that they're still somewhere in the cloud. And I suppose that raises really interesting questions about censorship and technology. I'm thinking about what you said yesterday and the conversation that you had, and building upon that. On the one hand, it's almost more terrifying the extent to which you could erase I mean, there's something very physical about book burning, right? Incinerating books is a process. Books have weight. You know, it's a...
Has logistics.
Yes, exactly. Which is, you know, whereas something like erasing a cloud...
Be in a second.
Yes.
Your memory is erased. You have to reinvent yourself. You cannot build on anything that was previously examined or explored. It scares me. I've always felt more safe with a physical book than a digital book, even though people sometimes might argue that the opposite is true. But I think even during the Nazi burning of books, we know that some books survived, but you cannot really survive the erasing of a cloud, you know? You cannot come out of that, so it's always better to have a physical book.
I'm thinking of an interview years ago between the Russian poet Joseph Brodsky and a scholar, and the scholar felt that Eastern European literature, or that you might say Russian literature too, that in some ways that Brodsky was fortunate, because in order to avoid the censor, artists had to create really interesting, elaborate metaphors, so that the surface would be disguised.
Yes.
And he said, "You're very lucky, you know." And Brodsky's reaction was like, "Liberty is the greater masterpiece, you know. Thank you very much, but no thanks," right? And I wonder if you can comment on the question of, like, maybe as artists, but also as readers in different respects, your experience of censorship as something that drives. It doesn't drive creativity, but something that creativity has to respond to.
So then I have to go to my past, to our past. I can say Ukrainian literature, I mean, history of Ukrainian literature used to be, to a high extent, the history of censorship. We never had some really free situation, especially in the times of Russian Empire. And it was not on the level of the plot, of the meaning, but on the level which language do you use to write your works. It was the year 1863, as Russian Minister of National Education Valuyev formulated some document, some ukaz, I don't know the English word, some order, official order, about a complete prohibition of Ukrainian language in social, in the sphere of culture, theater, book printing, and so on, with a very hard formula. There was never such language. There is no such language. Such language should never be. And so it was until the end of Russian Empire, more or less because there was the first Russian Revolution with more liberal changings in 1905 till 07. And so it was partly cancelled, this total prohibition. But it was also stimulating for many Ukrainian writers to publish their work abroad. So we had actually western part of Ukraine, which belonged to Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and there was no prohibition for Ukrainian texts and theater and music, songs and so on. So everyone from this Russian part of Ukraine published his or her works in Ukrainian West. So it's actually quite a long story, but I slowly come to my own biography. So I'm happy that I was born 1960 and not 10 years earlier, because I know such poets, my colleagues, who were 10 years, 7 years older than me, and they really suffered of this situation with Soviet censorship, because they tried to be independent, they tried to be nonconformists, and they tried to do a real contemporary, brave, unique poetry. And practically all of them were, so to speak, they were just closed by the system. They couldn't publish, but it was not so bad. They were all the time pursued. Even if they didn't do some political things, but just this manner of writing, this independent way of writing poetry was a kind of political activity. So one of them died in the year 1982, as he was 33 years old. He died in some hospital from some disease. He didn't want to live, actually. He was so oppressed by KGB, by different people on the street, by neighbors. It was like, you know, the man who lived in a total hate atmosphere of hate. And I'm just 10 years younger than him, and I'm very lucky. I started, as he died, I was a student, I finished my studies, and I had my very first publication. And should he live a little bit longer, he would enjoy this freedom of speech, freedom of publication that we reached at the end of 80s, at the beginning of 90s. So actually, there is no clear date in historic calendar after which we didn't have the censorship anymore. But it was very, very clear that they don't exist anymore, the censors. Yeah. They don't do it. Where are they? They just disappeared from our life. So I brought the next poems to the publishing house, and my editor said, "Oh, they are absolutely great. I'm going to publish them tomorrow." It was unthinkable 2 or 3 years earlier. So it was like a bomb, but in positive sense. It was a very good, very positive revolution in the meaning that I think it's the beginning of contemporary Ukrainian literature, the year of 1990. Maybe, because it was first time in its long history that situation without any censorship.
And I wonder if you said...
Yeah, I was thinking about your question, and then many ideas popped in my head. First thing I thought of is the character in 1984 by George Orwell, who used to work in the Ministry of Truth, and his colleague who worked on removing more and more words from the dictionary, which was the regime's way of limiting your thinking. I was thinking of that, and then I was thinking of something extremely opposite, which is like Iranian cinema. Because they work under very tight censorship. Like there is, the characters cannot touch. The woman should appear wearing a hijab. All of those taboos, and yet they managed to create masterpieces like Asghar Farhadi, like Abbas Kiarostami, and all those extremely creative people who managed to become better storytellers under censorship.
Even Jafar Panahi, I'm thinking of, who's not allowed to make a movie and then just takes a camera into taxis and makes a movie.
Yes, yes. And Mohsen Makhmalibaf, Majid Majidi, all those people. So I do know that sometimes they really manage to limit your thinking by taking words from you. But sometimes, if you restrain yourself, you can be more creative. And I think when language, there is so much to play with. We can use symbols, we can use metaphors, we can really mess with their heads and get away with it. So it becomes this like a game. Like, this is exactly how, I mentioned that yesterday, this is how I wrote my book. I wrote a book that is about banning books, but cannot be banned because it's so clean on the surface. So we get to be creative sometimes, and that's one way to fight back. That's one way to fight against censorship, by being more creative.
I would say more sophisticated, but not really creative. But maybe I remember as my first collection of poems were in progress in publishing house, and it was a time with the censorship. It was the middle of 80s, 85. So I got from the publisher, from my editor, I got a message. You know, you have to improve your poems, to change some lines, some words, because we should together go to the censor, and he won't permit this publication, because you have in your poems, you have too many devils and you have too many angels. And it was okay, many devils means many angels, to some balance, in a poetic balance, but editor could understand it because he himself was a poet. But he said, you know, we are together, we are doing the same thing, but we have somehow to fox the censor. So please take your beautiful poems and make some changes there. You know, like this very old Eastern Oriental Sufi tradition. They always write in their poems about God, but they never mention him.
Yes.
There is always God, but there is no word God.
Like Layla. It's usually a woman or a wine.
So please, change the devils and the angels in something. So I should work, and it was really, it was attractive. It was amazing. Doing, instead of angel, for example, something like bird, white bird.
Yes.
On the tree, or I don't remember what I decided about the devils. It was a dangerous field. Yes, but I had a possibility to republish those poems nowadays. I published some book of selected poems this year, and I found these old poems, and I was trying to make it back to my previous, to my first versions. And so I was somehow happy that maybe there was in that second version, I had more creativity, but I have more, what is this word? They were more authenticity in my earlier version. Yeah. And the poems were written as I was 21. So it was like a kind of journey to those times.
But speaking of subtle metaphors, I think, Radio Night, one of the frames of the story is that Yosef is a DJ. And so throughout the novel, you have these moments where you hear his broadcast. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for writing as well. The notion that you transmit, but you cannot see what's actually happening and who may be receiving the message. Because that's sort of what literature does, is the message is transmitted, and then sometimes you find out, and sometimes you don't, but it's out there, and the seeds are planted, and it can lead to wonderful things. Which leads me to the next question that I want to ask both of you, because it seems such an important part of your fictions, and probably working in a bookstore as well. Community, and in particular, the kind of bond that literature creates. In your novel, from the very first sentence, Kafka is present, yes. Right? And George Orwell is also present. Many other authors are, you can feel the way that the novel is partly a conversation with these other authors and their works. And likewise, even in the name of your character, Josef Brodsky, you have Joseph Roth, and the great Swiss writer, Robert Walser, and his walk makes multiple appearances. And maybe you can say something, because I think, going back to something that Michal said at the opening, he was quoting somebody, and the line was something like, at the heart of every dystopia, there is a utopia. And I think that if we're talking about all of suppression and these, all of the apparatus in which communication is closed or limited or flattened, writing seems to be a kind of utopia in which there is connection. And that seems to be a theme in your work, but I also wanted to ask to you as readers and writers about that community. Maybe you can start.
Maybe as a bookseller, I've always thought like creating a community and is kind of assuring a future for my bookstore, because it's it's not an easy business to run. And as a reader, I started as a lonely reader. I didn't have anyone to talk to at all. I was like the ugly duckling of the family, the only one who liked story, where all my siblings liked something else, even my parents. They never took me seriously. I secretly wrote my first novel, and when the publisher called and said, we love it, we want to publish it, my parents were in shock because they didn't know I was writing. So it was a very lonely journey for me until I opened the bookstore. And this is very crucial and it's very personal for me. It's important to create a space where it is safe to have a conversation. And I think it gets more and more crucial because the world is going crazy. And it's more important to stay sane. I don't know, a lady approached me yesterday when I was signing, and she reminded me of, yes, hi, and she reminded me of this line from George Orwell's 1984. It's like the most important thing is to stay sane, because you can lose your mind with all the stupidity and the violence and everything. So they are really very connected, what I do in the bookstore, in the publishing house, in my own writing, in my travels, when I talk to people. It's always trying to build this community or belong to this community where it is safe to talk, safe to have a conversation that is sane, where you have a chance of being seen and heard and understood, and you also have a chance of understanding someone else. And I think that is the ultimate goal of a bookstore. It is not selling books, it's really bringing people together and bridging people and channeling voices and give voice to the voiceless and allow this beautiful interaction between texts and personal experiences and everything. And I guess this explains in a way how the book was written, because there is a lot of subtext taken from literary classics like Alice in Wonderland or Pinocchio, or
and Alice is in both of the novels.
Zorba the Greek. It was always, these books are talking to each other, and I am creating this plot that works as a thread, because I wanted to also give a sense or create some reasoning to how the character is changing and maturing. Yeah. With his head, yeah.
I like very much such events like here. I have a quite big experience in it, because I'm one from the poetic group which we grounded in the middle of 80s, and this group has a name Bubaboo, which is abbreviation from three notions: burlesque, balagan, buffonada. So I would say it's burlesque is burlesque. Of course, balagan is a kind of chapiteau, wandering small circus or theater, and buffonada is buffoonery, is in French probably somehow similar. So we tried to create on the stage some live performance with our poems, which the poems were not improvised, they were ready, but the manner of performing them and everything else, so our dialogues among us, it was a kind of such balagan, of such theater. And so I always had this possibility to meet the readers and the listeners, thanks to this tradition. Actually, in Ukraine, the people are used to listen to the writers, how they read their texts. That's why our poets can read many of their poems by heart. They don't need to look into paper to read, or maybe into smartphone, no. And so it was a time at the end of 80s as, so to speak, new youth student community was born in Ukraine. And they were practically 95% of our audience. So it was absolutely young audience with many people who then were following us in different other cities, because because we traveled a lot, first of all inside of Ukraine and then a little bit abroad. And then we met again. We had a kind of revival or a comeback in 2000. And we noted that the audience is the same again. I mean, the students, again, the youth. The first students were probably the parents of this new audience that we had. So it's a kind of very special situation that most reading people in Ukraine are the young people. The people read the books in average so between 20 and 30 years of their lives. And it's always good to be a writer in Ukraine. Because he or she meets always young people on the presentations.
Thank you. Well, we have time for questions, and I imagine that there will be some. I see something in the back.
Thank you very much for your discussion. I just have one question for you. You make the link between creativity and censorship, and I was wondering how you see the United States. How would it be evolving in terms of creativity, since it seems that there are some words which are now forbidden and so on?
I didn't mention United States. I would do it, but in a very negative sense.
I think there was a time, there was a quote, I remember in the 60s, I think Philip Roth, the novelist, said, you know, we live in American society where, and he was actually comparing the US to Eastern Europe. He said in Europe, in the United States, everything goes and nothing matters. Whereas in Eastern Europe, nothing goes and everything matters. And I think things are changing now. In the United States, where things are starting to matter. It's, yeah.
But it was probably to you.
Yeah. This is a very political question. And like when I read the headlines by New York Times or those newspapers, I can see that the language, especially when it comes to what's happening in Palestine, it's very diluted. And sometimes you don't need to censor something, but you just need to discredit the source. Like if you say 500 people killed or died, not killed, it's always died, in bombing of Kamal Adwan hospital, Hamas says. So they always deliver the information in a way that makes it, that they throw doubt on it. But I know as an Arab, like 500 people died. This is another form of censorship, where they dilute things or sugarcoat things or report it in a way that makes you skeptical and less empathetic with what's happening. And I think this mainstream media machine, gigantic machine, is serving that purpose, that makes us less human because we are becoming less empathetic and more skeptical, and you know something is off, you know something is wrong. I'm not going to mention all the protests that are being shut down in campuses, and all the arrests, and all the people I know that are facing the threat of deportation, all of that form. It's really important to link what is happening, what happens to books, because at the end of the day, we are a niche part of the world's population. We are book lovers, readers, writers. But censorship has a bigger form, and and sometimes it's very deceptive. And the best trick of the devil is to hide or deny its own existence. Like, they really can hide the fact that this is censorship. I've faced censorship in the West. I've faced censorship in the East. Obviously, I come from the East. In the East, it is very clear. So it's easier to fight back because I can see it. In the West, it's you're not being politically correct, which is a very nice way of censoring people by sugarcoating the fact that you are not politically correct. And I think we need to pay attention to both forms. And I think the deceptive form of censorship is more dangerous.
But is political correctness not a form of contemporary censorship?
I think it is. I think it is. I had this interesting conversation once with Alberto Mangel. He said, we lovers of books and book censors agree on one thing. Books have to be offensive.
Yes.
Literature is offensive. We agree that literature is offensive, but they think because it's offensive, we should ban it. We think because it's offensive, we should read it, because we need people out of their comfort zone where such conversations are possible. And the best way to experience that is through someone else's story.
I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said, the secret of writer's success is to offend so many people as you can.
Hi, thank you so much for your speech. I wanted to ask you about the musical background in your life. And I'm from Moldova, and I heard a lot about Slava Vakarchuk, singer of Okean Elzy, who was also implied in protesting in the revolutions and all that stuff. And I'm very curious to know how, because it's mentioned in your biography that you are a singer as well. And I want to know a bit of that background and how did music influence your writing and all that stuff.
First of all, I have to precise this definition that I'm a singer. So, of course, I can sing because each Ukrainian can sing. But I'm rather a poet who makes the music together with musicians, and then we perform some of my poems or also prose excerpts with music. And yes, Slava Vakarchuk, the frontman of the band Okean Elzy, is a prominent figure in contemporary Ukrainian rock and roll music, and he was a very active participant of, especially of Second Maidan. And he did a lot of things after the beginning of Russian invasion in 2022. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks after the beginning of this big war. He played a big and very touching concert with his band in subway of Kyiv, on subway station, with a huge audience. And it was a very productive idea. Since then, they use in Ukraine to organize such cultural events, first of all, musical events in the cities where they have the subway, on the subway stations. So it's a new kind of musical culture to play the music deep in underground. And what concerns my novel, I try to somehow to combine the word, the text, and the sound. And I found this possibility through the figure of Joseph Rodsky, who is this piano player. He used to play as a keyboard musician in some band, and then he played during the revolution. The reader meet him in a moment he cannot play anymore. He was tortured. His fingers were completely destroyed, so he cannot play on the level he wished to play. And the only thing he can be a radio jay. He can listen to the music, he can select, he can do some musical anthologies, and he can do his programs, his night programs for the other people. And this is the only way for him to remain somehow in the world of music. If you purchase this book, I try to make an advertising now. There is a QR code, and it gives you an access to the playlist from this novel, because he always applies to some music. So you get two things buying just one book. You get also musical playlist.
We have time for one more question. If there is one. Did you, in the second row, you had a question? Sorry.
Yuri, I've read already your book with great interest, and I just wanted maybe to ask you to say a few words about your experience in Switzerland, because there is a very, not even funny, but very ironic description of certain particularities of the Swiss penitentiary system, political system, medical system, and all other specific features of our very small country, which used to be very idyllic and now becomes more normal in comparison to others. So maybe if you can say a few words, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I thought it is not the good place to tell about this part of my book. Because my Swiss experience is concerning the German-speaking part of the country. I spent in 2011. I spent 9 months in Switzerland, but 6 of them in Zug. And I almost visited the prison there. So it was my old dream to be inside of Swiss prison, to see how does it look like. And I had a contact with director of prison in Zug, so I was invited by him to have 2 different readings there. One of them for prisoners and the second for personnel. But these 2 readings were cancelled in the very last minute because there was an incident with 2 prisoners who escaped. I hope they were not scared about my coming reading there. One of them was from Serbia and the second from Macedonia. So it was always tempting me, this topic, and I decided that Joseph Brodsky instead of me, that he should have this experience.
Yes, and it's a very, yeah. Yes, there's lots of kind of clubs and activities and comforts that you might not anticipate in prisons in different parts of the world, as you can see here. And he's very funny in depicting the contrast between this world and other incarceral, systems elsewhere. Thank you so much to you for joining us, both for the festival and for this evening, and hopefully we can all just acknowledge and thank our authors for coming as well. Thank you.